Welcome everyone. Today is September 7th, 2021. My name is Chris Hoffman. I'm a business data analyst for NEMSIS, for the NEMSIS TAC. Thanks everyone for attending today. Hope everyone had a wonderful and relaxing holiday weekend. Today's training is titled State Performance Measures Dashboard. Very excited to have a first look at this dashboard for you here. Want to remind everyone that these webinars are, of course, like everything we try to do here, it's a conversation. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to utilize the chat function or come off of mute and feel free to ask your question live. Just so that you know, the meeting is going to be recorded, so it is available later on our YouTube channel. If you want to be notified about when we have these types of trainings or of other events that are going on with the NEMSIS TAC, you can subscribe on our website to our Google group messages, or you can also find all of our different social medias on there and subscribe to those and get updated on those. That's it for housekeeping here. I'd like to turn the time over to Kevin and Ben, who are going to take us through the State Performance Measures dashboard. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, Chris. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll introduce the dashboard, and then we can dig into the details on it. So we'll start with the fun stuff first. Hopefully that'll get people jazzed. So let me make sure the right screen here. Hopefully. All right. So hopefully everyone is seeing the NEMSIS homepage right now. If you're not, please let me know through the chat, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. So what we're going to be talking about today is a dashboard that is state specific. It's called the State Performance Measures Dashboard. It's one of many dashboards that we have for state data managers. Its location within our website is in a usual location for all of our other dashboards. So if you're not familiar with that, we'll walk through it really briefly. It's from View Reports down into State Reports. And right now we have dashboards across both our legacy version 2 dataset and our version 3. This dashboard is version 3 specific, so we'll click on version 3 dashboards. And conveniently enough for our presentation here today, it's the dashboard that we're talking about is actually up at the top of the list. And I do want to just make note of the fact that this is actually a fairly lengthy list. So we do have quite a few dashboards on version 3 available to you, the State Data Manager. So don't stop here. Make sure you check out our other dashboards. Now, along with the list of every dashboard that we have, we also like to have a user guide or manual associated with the dashboard. That is something that hopefully you'll read and find educational about not only the actual details of the dashboard, but in particular, we spend a lot of time going through, when we're talking about dashboards, discussing inclusion criteria. And in this case, our inclusion criteria is, of course, for this dashboard, is a set of measures that have been put together by an outside a party called the National EMS Quality Alliance, or NEMSQA for short. And we'll be digging into those in detail a little bit later, but I want to let you know that every dashboard, as a minimum, has a user guide that describes not only the dashboard itself, but the criteria by which we've decided to include or exclude a particular record. And oftentimes we will also have a training video like the one that we are recording today. And in fact, at some time in the future, this video will actually be linked to alongside the dashboard itself. Now, this being a state dashboard, you do have to authenticate into the system. So you have to use your username and password. I've gone through and already authenticated in just for expediency's sake. And but normally, once you click on that link, unless you've already logged in to another dashboard, you will be prompted for your username and password. If you are not sure what your username is, or perhaps what your password is in particular, at the bottom of every page on our website is a forgot password link that will guide you through the process of resetting your password. Like most sites these days, we don't know what your password is, so we cannot recover it for you. You have to go through the forgot password process. If you don't think that you have a password or want access to something, the place to go for that is actually a little bit before. It's right here back on the list of dashboards. And if you think you don't have a NEMSIS account, then you can click here where it says click here to fill out a form and request one. And we also do provide that forgot password link here as well as in the bottom of the page. So for today's presentation, I've gone through and mocked up a fictitious state with some fictitious agencies. Because this is state level data, we can't share with everyone without permission information on a particular state. And I like to point that out on every training that if you didn't have custody of a record, and in this case, when it comes to a state data manager, what that means is that that record wasn't submitted up to your state system and then passed from your state system up to the NEMSIS Technical Assistance Center, then we're not going to grant you, except in special circumstances that are perhaps beyond the scope of this training, we're not going to grant you access to that data. So you can't see data from another state. You can't even see data that was maybe generated on an incident within your state unless that record was submitted up to your state system and then on up to us. So again, for our purposes today, we've created just a some fictitious information based on real data so that we can do this presentation. Here we are at the dashboard. We're, pretend we've already authenticated in under your name. And I'm just going to briefly run through the mechanics of this dashboard for those of you who are not familiar with how our dashboards operate. And then I'll turn it over to Ben for a detailed presentation and information on the measures themselves and how they're constructed. So most of our dashboards, particularly our newer dashboards, start up at the top with just a very basic sort of orientation on the data. How many records are we looking at? In this case, we're at activation, and that's a patient care report. And how many EMS agencies are included in this in whatever we're looking at today. Then down here we have, in this dashboard in particular, we have an opportunity for selecting a particular performance measure. As I said, we'll get into detail on what each of these measures are to the extent that we can in this training. But for right now, I'll just show you the list that we've got. I think it's 9, it might be 10 measures here of performance at the national level based on those NEMSQA measures. Hopefully fairly clearly labeled with a name and identifier and then a very brief title on what those are. And you can select one and only one performance measure at a time. Then down here we have EMS agency number. Now you may notice that up at the top I've got 105 agencies, and here I've only got 4. Please understand that's just for presentation purposes. That said, this dashboard is still very much a work in progress, as many of our dashboards are. And so if in the course of you going through this dashboard on your own time for your own state, if you notice anything that seems inconsistent, please let us know. That's our job here, is to get your feedback and act on it. So we definitely want to know if we're presenting something that doesn't agree with what you're seeing in your own state system. So again, just for the purposes of presentation here, I'm only going to use 4 fictitious agencies. We'll get into a little bit later about how those filters operate. Down below, we just have various visualizations that show different aspects of how the measure or the agency shakes out. We have our trend line here, multi-year. You'll notice that it has some legends here where the gray line is our national performance. So that means that for whatever measure we chose up here, in this case it's Pediatrics 01, this is the national, and then the blue is the state, or your state if you're logged in. If I were to select a particular agency, we'll select agency 96, then we get a third line, and that's agency 96's performance for this measure over the course of these several years. So this allows you, the state data manager, to compare national versus state versus an individual agency. And notice, just as the trend line here reacted to our choice of agency, it'll also react to our choice of performance measure as well. And so now we've switched from Pediatrics 01 to Stroke 01, but we've still remained on agency 96. The lines, the 3 lines are still there, but they've changed their shape, indicating that they're measuring a different thing. Down below, we have different categorizations of, in this case, the Stroke 01 for agency 96. Geography, my fictitious state here is somewhere within the Western United States, but it contains multiple urbanicities, and so we've segmented that out. We segmented this by organizational status, type, agency annual percentage volume, and level of care. Now, if those all sound like good things to you, but you're not sure what those mean in terms of the standard, the NEMSIS standard, you can always come back to the NEMSIS main website, go to technical resources, data dictionaries, and XSD to view the elements within the data dictionary and perhaps match those to our labels. That's the hard way. But again, the easy way is just to open up that user guide, and that's actually going to provide you with the element that was used for that segmentation. Make sure I'm getting the right tab here. Now, urbanicity and geography are not part of the NEMSIS standard. They come from other locations. Urbanicity is based on USDA urban influence codes. And I think the geography here, and I always, I probably should have checked the user manual myself because I always get it messed up. I think this is census division. It's either division or region, whichever one has fewer elements. It's one of those two, and I can never remember which one. But it's those, that's where those come from. Everything else is an element within the standard. And of course, we can, as always, with all of our dashboards, if you want a little bit more descriptive information, we can roll over and get a tooltip on that. And if we just want to look at fire department info, we can click on that, and that will actually get that as well. We should probably, fire department is probably really only a state level measure. If these were real agencies, probably only one of these would be lit up for us. But again, I've created some synthetic agencies. So I guess agency 96 is a composition of all these different things. But by doing that, and I can show you, we've now unselected fire department, or maybe I just want to do urban so we can see how that changes the timelines up there. Notice that our trend lines are changing based on what I'm selecting. You see, and see how those are different. And so that's an aspect of all of our dashboards, that clicking on something within one or many of the visualizations will filter all of the other visualizations. So for example, if I wanted to get really fancy and I cared about everything except for urban, then I could do that. And now I filtered everything. I've excluded urban from my analysis using this dashboard. And then the final thing that I like to show people, final two things, I should say. One's up here at the top, which is the subscribe button, which all of you, if you have a NEMSIS username and password, and you have access to dashboards, you should have this ability to subscribe. And what that allows you to do is to select this dashboard to be sent to you on a regular basis in your email. And you'll get the choice of between an image or a PDF, or if you want everything, then you can have it as an image and a PDF. And so if this is something that's important to you, you can get it sent to you in your email on a regular basis. And you have a few different options in terms of how frequently and on what day. The choice is up to you, but I will tell you that our dashboards normally only refresh once a week over the weekend. So if you choose to receive this in your email every day, just know every weekday, just know that it's only going to be different one day a week, and that's on Mondays. So if you really want to see the same thing for 4 days, you can do so, but this only refreshes one day a week. And then you just hit subscribe and we'll get that sent out to you. Now, perhaps you don't want to subscribe to it, but you still want something of value. Say that, you really wanted that suburban, rural, wilderness, and maybe you wanted a single agency. We'll go back to that agency 96. And you just wanted to download this because you wanted to take it and go show that agency 96 how they're performing across these measures, then you can use the download. And again, here you have a couple of different options to download this dashboard onto your local computer. Image and PDF, just as in the email. If you're wanting to put this into a presentation, then maybe downloading it as a PowerPoint slide is going to be the easiest thing for you to do, to just import it into a presentation or copy and paste it out. You can do data and crosstab as well. And those will get you the raw numbers. Again, filtered based on your security. So maybe you wanted to change the trend line into a bar chart for some reason for a presentation. You just don't like trend lines. Data or crosstab would allow you to do that. The real difference between the two is data is a text file. Crosstab is going to download into Excel.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
You have a couple questions in the chat from Ridgely about the geography and urbanicity. You want to take a crack at those?
Absolutely. Geography and urbanicity, is that for the whole state? So to the extent that geography can be for a whole state, the answer is yes. Every state, it belongs to only one census region or division. So you're only going to see that, you're only going to see one selection there. And urbanicity, most states have a mixture of all four urbanicities. So you will be presented with that for the whole state. Now, something I neglected to mention is also that we have a public version of this dashboard that only shows national information. So it only has the one trend line. So you could use that, for example, to if you wanted to look at in this case, trends across the different geographies, then the public would allow you to do that. And if you wanted to get to there, you'd go view reports, public reports, version 3 dashboards, and then it doesn't get top billing here, it's down here at number 2. And that would allow you to maybe do a little bit of a comparison at that national geography level. And I think,
Kevin,
yes.
Yeah, Kevin, sorry, this is Clay. I think Ridgely's question, though, is about what geography or urbanicity is based on, right? So all of these measures down here that you showed are agency measures, right? So it's what's the organizational status of the agency? I think urbanicity and geography is based off of the incident zip codes for which each agency responds, correct?
Yes, so that is correct. It's based on incident.
So does that answer your questions, Ridgely? I think. Yeah, okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Clay. Are there any other questions about this dashboard? Okay, if anything else comes up.
Kevin, could I,
of course, Clay.
ask you, just a couple of quick questions for the states, I think that would be handy. So above, when you chose just a couple of urbanicities and that orange agency line went to just a couple of dots and stuff, maybe you can speak to the fact that, yeah, for example, you can come into situations where an agency just doesn't. I think this is stroke. If you scoot it up a little bit, I think that was it is still set on stroke. Yes. Yeah. So here's just this test agency did not care for a lot of strokes, right? So you just end up with these points in time for the strokes that they did care for. So sometimes you won't have solid lines. Lots of these performance measures are for rare events, right? We want to perform well during rare events, so you may see this often. Then Kevin, can you speak a little bit about to the timeliness of the data? And then I have kind of like one more example after that, right? The value of this, if you send this to an agency, just like Kevin provided, is that you're not sending them data about how they performed on this NEMSQA measure last year or last month. As you mentioned, the data is updated per week, right, Kevin?
Correct.
Right. So that's the cool part of this, right? And I can walk through a scenario that we were kind of thinking about when we built this, was the idea that you could decide that you're going to choose 10 agencies in your state. For example, if you're a state representative, you run it for each of the agencies. As Kevin described, you run off the PDFs, you can send them to the agencies. If they're interested in tracking that NEMSQA measure, then they go into this public dashboard that's available under EMS agencies for types of dashboards. Can you go to where that is? So if you go to view reports, there you can say, go to EMS agencies. If you go back up to view reports, yes, or you go to EMS agencies. And then I think it's here, scoot down a little bit. I think it's also here, right? Yeah, there's the performance measure dashboard. So you can tell your agency, hey, if you want to track this every week, or see what's going on for your type of agency, you can't actually pull this up yet for your agency as an agency, but you can go down to that bottom part and say, okay, I'm in the West and I serve a urban population. So go ahead and choose urban. And I'm a mixed agency. And I am, scoot down a little bit, I am private. And I serve 1,000 to 10,000 calls per year. And whatever the last one is, let's say, and I'm BLS, for example, then they can compare the data that you provided to them for their specific agency to how they're doing to all agencies like them across the entire country, right? So they could look at the report that you sent them, and then they can compare themselves to all agencies like them across the country and say, oh, okay, are we doing well or are we not doing well, right? That's the rub always, right? Is 63% good or is 63% bad for this measure, right? Well, the dashboard that you send them shows them the national, the state, and their agency. If they take that report you send them and then they pull up like agencies across the country, then they've got 4 measures of comparison. How do we compare to the nation? Or 3, how we compare to the nation, how we compare to our state, and this, they can say how I compare to like agencies across the country. So 3 measures of benchmarking, which can be incredibly valuable for the agencies. So I'll stop there. I'm a little too verbose, but just wanted to describe that there are those different levels of benchmarking that an agency can do. Sorry about that.
No, I think that was an important example of the utility of using, looking not only at the state dashboard that we've created specifically for you, the state data manager, but how to utilize that alongside the public dashboard when communicating performance to an agency within your state. I think that was an outstanding example of exactly how to do that. So again, I'll offer people a final opportunity if there's any questions they specifically have a top of mind about, the state level dashboard or perhaps even the public dashboard. Ask them now, but of course, always you can jump in at any time or email us if there are any questions. So seeing nothing in the chat, at least for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the balance of our time to Ben to talk in a little bit more detail about the NEMSQA measures.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to share my screen here and just show the NEMSQA page real quick. Just so that people can understand a little bit more about these measures, it's NEMSQA.org, and they have a little bit more information on their website about each of both the measures as well as the measure development process. So it is designed to be kind of a collaborative measure development process with multiple stakeholders trying to define useful measures at the state and national level for EMS agencies. And they do have a package for each of the measures. So the measures that have been implemented that we have included in the dashboard are 3 for pediatric, seizure, stroke, 4 for trauma, 2 for safety, and then hypoglycemia as well. And then each measure package contains some pseudocode that shows our data or the NEMSIS data elements and how they are. They create the numerator and denominator as well as additional information. So with that being said, I know that's kind of a really high level comment about them. I guess, does anyone have any questions about sort of the measures themselves or sort of your usefulness for individual agencies?
Yeah, Ben, this is Clay. The only thing I would just add real quickly is you'll notice when you as a state or agency compare this list to what we have on the NEMSIS website, you'll see some that are not there. For example, pediatric 03. There are some of these measures that we just can't capture at the national level because we don't collect the data. So we don't collect the weight of patients at the national level. So you won't see pediatrics 03 on our website. And then Ben, I think maybe an easier way to see how they're constructed. I think the user guide has a link to the actual NEMSIS calculations as to how each of the ones that we developed were built. That might that might be somewhat helpful if folks want to dig in a little bit on that. So I think so. Let's see.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Clay, your example was actually pretty helpful. That kind of set this up pretty nicely. But for each, let's see if the actual.
Yeah, click over to the left where it says EMS. Yeah, there. I think it has the actual.
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep. So there's the actual code that was used for the numerator and denominator for pediatric respiratory assessment.
With that, you should be able to see each of the individual fields. So I know kind of related to Ridgely's question about how the geography is calculated. You should be able to see which specific fields are actually included in the dashboard. Sorry about that.
No, Ben, it's always great to hear from your son. Lightens my day.
She is fascinated by some of the presentation materials. Sorry about that. Clay, are you able to kind of talk a little bit more about the creation of the NEMSQA measures?
Yeah, happy to do that. Yeah, so the NEMSQA measures actually were an extension off of the EMS Compass project. So all those who may remember that work, I think it's been about 5 years ago now since that work kind of finalized. It somewhat abruptly ended, and so there were a number of measures that were finalized, but there was also a number of measures that were being worked on by that process. And I don't think we're completely finished during the funding cycle. So hence NEMSQA, I think, picked up the baton and they revalidated the ones that were existing. Slight changes were made to the ones that had been finalized during the EMS Compass project, and then others were completed and then finalized. Also, another note that's would be important to make is that the NEMSIS TAC has provided this pseudocode you see here to apply these NEMSQA measures to NEMSIS version 3.5. So that's available on the NEMSQA website, and it's available from us if you want to see that code. But as the data comes into us in 3.5, then that dashboard that Kevin described to you, that will remain true, and it will be based on version 3.5 data. So we're all prepared to ensure that these performance measures continue to exist and continue to be valid with the move to NEMSIS version 3.5. Any other questions regarding the NEMSQA process or where these measures came from? Okay.
Thanks, Clay. And knowing that so each of the dashboard measures will display a graph for each of the measures, as well as a way to benchmark a potential type of agency against sort of national and state comparative data. Is there anything you would like to see or any feedback you have for us as Kevin was able to kind of display the dashboards? I know that that's some of you who may not have seen them before, that's not a lot of time to provide feedback, but is there anything in particular you would like to see from those dashboards?
This is Clay. I'll throw out one idea. Would love to hear back from states or from individual agencies. I mean, one of the initial thoughts that we've had here as an extension would be to provide a way for an agency to view themselves, right? So that seems pretty straightforward. And why hasn't NEMSIS done that? I think it's mostly been about our concern for ensuring the confidentiality of data and having every EMS agency across the country have their own username and password. And how do we protect against, a provider who perhaps works in two different agencies having access to both, or just things like that, security issues like that, right? Or if a disgruntled employee in one agency was to give the password to someone else or something like that. Any feelings at the agency level or state level about the return on investment if we were to try to provide a username and password to each of the agencies to be able to view a dashboard like this, to be able to track their performance over time? Okay, a pretty quiet group this morning. Yeah, Andy points out, yeah, it would be desirable, but it would be kind of a nightmare to manage. Let's see. Yeah, one related thought. Thanks for the comment in the chat. One initial thought was, and we piloted this some years ago, was to have a state contact. So make this available, develop an agency level dashboard, but then have the state data managers be responsible for indicating to us which agencies would opt in to being able to use this dashboard and which ones I just wouldn't use it, right? So one thing we beta tested in the past was, hey, you as a state data manager, give us contact your agencies. If you've got some innovative, forward-thinking agencies that want to be able to use a dashboard like this to track their performance on a weekly basis, let us know. We'll assign a username and password to those select folks. We'll give that username and password to you. The state data manager would be responsible for helping us ensure that it's up to date and that the employees within that agency continue to be those who are responsible for data quality or something like that, right? I would assume that's who would receive the username and password. But the crux of the idea is that the state data manager would help us identify the agencies who may want to have access to this. And then we would just manage that select group of agencies that are actively interested in utilizing this technology. I think that would cut it down from thousands and thousands of agencies probably to a much smaller group. What do people feel about?
Clay, I think this is Andy Nunes from Oregon. I think that's an interesting idea. I just would be concerned about some equity questions around equity in terms of access to particular agencies having access to their own data, right? If for us as a state, we are really focused on equity. And so part of that is making sure that the rural places and the smaller places can, know what's in their data. And we have a set of state performance metrics that we're communicating with agencies and also with vendors. I would hesitate to accept the offer that you just described, only because it sounds like it's putting more work on us to kind of track who has access to what. And what we would really love to try to do is automate some kind of a report, either via an API or something else, where we just say, here are the measures we'd like to track, and somehow just be able to get that agency specific information and then either email that directly to them if it's all data that is, has been de-identified, or we have a way of sharing data that we keep confidential securely, but that's where my experience of like managing the permissions for those is it's an opportunity cost, right? In terms of who you're making sure has access to the data and such. So I think we just have to keep talking, having this conversation until, we can either get creative enough or the technology improves enough to where the overhead on that isn't, it would be a lot we're like 3 people in Oregon and some states are smaller. I know that.
Yeah, Andy, great comments. I want to I'll comment on 2 things you mentioned. Great comments. Thank you. One is that, for example, Oregon, I know you guys are very forward thinking in regards to quality measures there in the state of Oregon. So one thing, right, is we want to make sure that for a similar type measure, the performance quality metric that you're providing out, the performance measure you're providing out is not different from the one that we're providing, right? So the stuff that's coming out of the state of Oregon for the same type of issue, we want to make sure that it doesn't differ from the data that's coming out of the national measures, right? So the standardization based on NEMSQA is helpful in that regard to some states. But gosh, if a state is very forward thinking, has their own measures, they calculate in their own way, then don't utilize these, right? You have a system that's working very well, and we don't want to be sending out 2 different performance scores for the same topic that differ. That would
ours are based on NEMSQA.
Oh, good. And then the other comment I'll just make sure is kind of out there is that this very data is available in a national API, right? So we have an API out that can provide this data out on an agency level, and we make it available to software vendors to be able to contact that API on a weekly basis to update the numbers, right? So the idea was that, for whether you're using Zoll or Beyond Lucid or Image Trend at the local level, that if that software is calling into the API, they can be providing that national benchmark to agencies on a weekly basis. And so that exists, Andy, and other states, just so you know that. And we need to we reached out to the vendors recently and said, hey, how many of you folks have actually integrated this API into your performance measures and provide that out to agencies? And few have done it. So we continue to maintain that API. We, as kind of the states and the consumers of that software, need to be kind of pressing them, hey, please build the technology to utilize that API and get these benchmark measures out to our agencies. So that's there, Andy, and if we can get the software to recognize that, then there can be national benchmarks that are available to all of our agencies.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Yeah,
totally. Thank you.
okay, I'll turn the floor back over to you guys. Sorry. Yep.
Thank you, Clay. Chris, I think unless there are any other questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap up this training.
Perfect. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for attending today's training. If you do have a refrigerator moment, you get to the fridge and you think, oh man, there was something I did want to ask Kevin or someone else in the NEMSIS TAC, 100%. Get back in touch with us, ask the questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with our answers. Once again, this this training has been recorded, so it will be available shortly on our YouTube channel. If you do want to be notified about this event and others, if you go to the NEMSIS homepage and then look for the button that says sign up for our Google group, you can put an email address in there and you'll be notified when we have announcements about training like this and other things like our annual meeting and whatnot. Also, if there is anything else, please feel free to reach out to us at any time, and hope you have a great rest of your day.